I remember the sun. Not the furious furnace that bathes Terra's skies now, choked with ash and the industrial fumes of 10 millennia, but the clean Anatolian dawn that once rose over fields of wheat and herds of oxen. The air was cool then, rich with soil and the scent of wood smoke from clay hearths. I remember the hum of insects circling above the river reeds, the weight of a stone knife in my hand, and the voices of my kin calling to one another across the hills. That was my first life, my first breath, my first heartbeat. It seems impossible now that I was ever merely a man. And yet I was born to mortal parents in a mortal hut, upon mortal soil. My hands bled when I cut them, my stomach ached when I went hungry, my eyes blurred with tears when my father was slain by treachery. I had a name once, though it has long since dissolved into the dust of forgotten centuries. That name was mine, until it was buried beneath 1,000 others, until I was no longer one man but the echo of thousands. For when the shamans of humanity ended their cycle of reincarnation and wove themselves into a single soul, that soul was me. I am the sum of their sacrifice, the new man, the perpetual, the emperor. But before all of that, there was a last moment of mortality, a last heartbeat. It comes back to me even now, as if across the abyss of eternity. I see blood in the air, not my own, but that of my people. I feel the flicker of sunlight against my face as it has so many times across so many ages. I hear the hum, not of insects this time, but of a million souls whispering in the Imperium, pressing against the walls of my mind. And I remember the thought that struck me then. I was born as a man. I will die as something else. For mortality is a gift, fleeting but merciful. One dies and one is free. I was not granted that mercy. My breath did not end. My heart did not still. The cycle of death and rebirth that was my inheritance was taken from me, replaced with an eternity that is not life, not death, but an unbroken suffocation of time. They call it immortality. I call it the heaviest chain of all. Even as I stand in memory among the Neolithic hills, I feel the weight of the eons to come pressing down upon that innocent dawn. I know the names I will take: prophet, conqueror, warlord, king, god. I know the blood that will follow me, oceans of it spilled in my name. I know the sons I will fashion, only to watch them betray me. I know the throne of gold and iron that will become my tomb. It begins with one heartbeat, the last heartbeat of a man. And then eternity begins. I was not born in the way mortals understand birth. I was made. The year was the 8th millennium before the age you now count in stars and centuries. In a land of Anatolian plains, where the Sakarya River ran between herds of goats and fields of wheat, where clay huts squatted beneath a sun that bled red into the horizon, mankind was still young. The people carved stone, wove linen, dug irrigation channels with bronze tools. They prayed to the sky, to the earth, to the fire that consumed their offerings. They thought themselves masters of their world, but they were blind. For there were among them those who could see further, the shamans. They were the first to hear the whispers of the Imperium, the first to recognize that the wind carried more than dust, that the darkness carried more than silence. They were humanity's earliest psyker guides, midwives to the soul. For tens of thousands of years they walked beside man, guarding him as he learned to stand upright, as he first smelted or as he first painted gods upon walls. They whispered to chieftains in dreams. They spoke to the dead and calmed the storms. But even they could not stop the tide. The Imperium was thickening. The emotions of billions of humans were feeding its depths. Wars had begun to echo louder. Greed, lust, rage, ambition, all of it bled into the warp. And in that ocean of thought and madness, predators stirred. Not yet gods, not yet whole, but vast embryonic hungers that feasted on what they could reach. And the shamans began to die. Not just in body, but in soul. Where once they could die and reincarnate, carrying their wisdom from one life to the next, now their essence was torn away, consumed, shredded into nothingness by the proto-demons clawing at the skein. The chain of rebirth was snapping link by link. Each elder's passing left humanity poorer, weaker, more vulnerable. They could see it as clearly as they saw the stars. If they fell, humanity itself would follow. So they gathered. I remember it, though I was not yet born. The echo of that gathering rings within me even now. They came from every corner of old Earth. The steppe riders of the East, the pale mystics of the frozen North, the desert prophets, the keepers of fire, the dreamwalkers of jungles long gone. They met upon the high plateau under a sky heavy with constellations. Thousands upon thousands of psychers, the greatest conclave mankind has ever known. Their chants rose like the sound of thunder over mountains. Words older than language, syllables shaped to vibrate both air and warp alike. They linked hands. They drew blood into bowls of bronze. They poured it upon the soil of Anatolia, marking the ground with runes that still burn in my mind when I close my eyes. And then in one accord they drank the poison. 10,000 souls severed at once. 10,000 sparks blazing free, not in a trickle but in a flood. The air split apart, the earth shuddered, the warp screamed. Where the demons lunged to consume, they were instead engulfed by psychic fire, by a conflux of unity so vast that their forms collapsed into shrieking nothingness. For the span of a single heartbeat, the warp was purified by sacrifice. And in that fire I was conceived. I was not one man. I was all of them. Their memories flowed into me, the old hunter tracking gazelle, the midwife whispering prayers over childbirth, the priest scrawling symbols into ash, the chieftain's counselor guiding him toward peace instead of slaughter. Their lives braided into my soul, their deaths sealed into my essence. I was their answer to annihilation, their only weapon against the storm. I was born a child, but I was never truly a child. My parents were simple Anatolian herders, my siblings innocent in their play. But when I looked into fire, I saw visions of future empires. When I lay beneath the night sky, I heard the cries of unborn gods. I dreamed of swords not yet forged, of towers not yet built, of stars not yet reached. I laughed when they laughed. I bled when I stumbled. But in my laughter was a chorus of the dead, and in my blood ran the sacrifice of thousands. I am a perpetual. Death cannot claim me. My essence does not scatter into the immaterium. I do not reincarnate because I do not need to. I am the culmination of their will, their defiance, their last act of guardianship. I am their vessel, their prison, their weapon. They thought they saved mankind by creating me. Perhaps they did. But I ask myself even now, seated upon the throne for 10,000 years, did they curse me instead? Because I was not simply born. I was chosen without choosing. And every step I have taken, every war I have fought, every empire I have raised, has carried the weight of their sacrifice behind it. I'm not one man. I am the echo of thousands. I am the shaman's legacy. I walked the earth for 38,000 years before I raised my hand to rule. 38 millennia in which I wore 1,000 faces and carried 1,000 names. I was emperor and beggar, prophet and soldier, scholar and slave. I was the whisper in a chieftain's dream, the shadow at a king's council, the figure in the market square telling a tale that turned one man's heart. I walked not as a god but as a man among men. The ages of stone and bronze. The first empires rose from mud, brick and clay. I smelled the papyrus drying beneath the desert sun as scribes etched symbols into it, crude records that would one day be called history. I stood in the cool shade of temples where incense rose to idols, where priests cut the throats of goats and asked their gods for rain. I heard the clash of bronze swords, men in chariots screaming names of gods who never answered them. I answered, though never with revelation. I was the advisor who told one pharaoh to measure the Nile's flood instead of praying to it. I was the builder who showed an architect how to raise stones so vast they would outlast dynasties. I was the silent hand, never the crown. Iron and fire. When iron was born in forges of fire, I was there. I smelled the sharp tang of iron filings, the heat of bellows, the sweat of smiths laboring in the night. Armies marched with iron blades that sang a harsher note than bronze ever could. I taught one warlord to temper his steel in oil, another to align his phalanx by the stars. But for every step forward there was blood. For every man I guided to knowledge, 10 more drowned the earth in slaughter. I saw city after city burn, their walls collapsing into ash. Children's cries echoed into the night as tribes carved each other apart for dominion over rivers, fields, or pride. Always I whispered, build, do not destroy. Unite, do not divide. But mankind's hunger for dominance was stronger than my voice. The kingdoms and empires. I walked through marble palaces where senators plotted in whispers. I wore the robes of generals, the chains of slaves, the crown of kings. I heard the orators proclaim that they ruled by right of heaven, by mandate of gods, by destiny of conquest. But I knew better. For every empire that rose, another crumbled into dust. I watched the banners of Rome unfurl, armies marching with eagle standards glittering in sunlight. I smelled the leather of their shields, the oil on their blades, the sweat of their drilled formations. I watched them conquer and thought, this too shall fall. And it did as all things mortal do. In the shadows I always worked. I was the counselor who told a ruler to codify his laws. I was the monk who copied manuscripts so wisdom would survive barbarian fire. I was the explorer who told sailors to map the seas, not just fear them. Always I was there. Always unseen. The paradox of guidance. Do you understand the torment of eternity? I had the power to rule outright, to seize crowns and thrones, to bend empires to my will. I could have forged humanity into one order long before your histories were even written. But I did not. I guided. I nudged. I whispered. Because to rule too early would have crushed freedom, and without freedom there can be no growth. To lead too directly would have created dependency, and dependency breeds weakness. Yet as I walked through millennia, I asked myself, did I truly protect humanity, or did I merely chain it with invisible bonds? Did I allow men to think they were free, when in truth every turning of their history was a path I had laid? The endless burden. I smelled the salt of oceans as ships crossed horizons for the first time. I tasted gunpowder smoke when black powder was born in alchemist fires. I heard the engines roar when steam first churned wheels of iron. And with each new age, with each discovery, I asked, is this enough? Will this safeguard them? Will this prepare them for the storm I know is coming? For I heard it always, beneath the laughter of kings and the cries of merchants, beneath the chanting of priests and the clash of soldiers, the howl of the warp. The chaos gods grew fatter with every war, every greed, every lust. And I alone knew they were coming. So I walked. I whispered. I endured. I was never seen for what I was. To some I was a prophet, to others a scholar, to most just a stranger passing through. Only I knew the truth. I was humanity's warden, its architect, its eternal guardian. And yet in my darkest thoughts I wondered, did I create humanity's destiny? Or did I merely chain it to mine? I had walked in silence for 38,000 years. I had worn masks, whispered in the ears of rulers, steered empires with invisible hands. But there came a time when whispers no longer sufficed. Terra had fallen into ruin. The age of strife had left the cradle of humanity in ashes. Warp storms swallowed the stars. The old nations shattered into thousands of squabbling fiefdoms, each ruled by techno-barbarians, gene tyrants, and warlords drunk on the relics of the dark age of technology. Psychers emerged in ever-growing numbers, their uncontrolled powers tearing holes into reality, vomiting demons into the world. The soil itself was scarred, deserts of glass where orbital fire had burned, oceans poisoned by radiation, cities collapsed into cannibal fortresses of iron and bone. Terra was dying. If I remained hidden, humanity's birthplace would be lost, and with it, the future of our species. So I chose to act. Not as whisper, not as shadow, but as emperor. I remember the moment of revelation. I strode into battle clad not in rags nor robes, but in golden warplate, a living sun upon the battlefield. My eyes burned with the lightning of the warp, my voice thundered with command that made men fall to their knees and machines awaken in awe. For the first time, I no longer veiled my nature. The air split with the roar of bolters, the crackle of lost fire. The ozone tang of burning air filled my lungs. The earth itself quaked as the warbands clashed, chain blades hacking flesh from bone, crude tanks belching smoke. I descended among them, my blade an arc of pure light, my gauntlet smashing iron skulls like clay. I was not a king among kings. I was their end. The unification wars were not battles of honor. They were annihilations. Entire gene forges turned against me, spitting out armies of twisted abominations bred for war. Thunder warriors, my first sons, marched at my side, colossal giants of flesh and gene labor, the prototypes of what would become the Astartes. They were brutal, imperfect, but they obeyed, and their fury broke armies that would have slaughtered mortal men. I saw the Pan-Pacific Empire, whose gene tyrant demanded worship as a god. His warriors came clad in scaled armor, their veins swollen with combat drugs. I burned his throne to ash, his empire crumbling in days. I saw the Nordific technoguilds, their cybernetic monstrosities crawling on insect limbs, hurling plasma that scorched the horizon. I tore their machines apart with my own hands, the smell of scorched circuitry and charred flesh mingling in the wind. Each conquest was written not in treaties but in fire. Cities toppled. Fortresses cracked open. Gene lords fell screaming, their corpses broken at my feet. And still I walked forward, inexorable. The war was not fought only with armies. It was fought in every sense. The scent of promethium burned my nostrils, firestorms devouring entire districts. The ground thundered with the advance of armored columns, iron treads crushing the bones of the fallen. The air crackled with psychic storms as rogue psychers unleashed hell, their screams echoing into the immaterium before my hands silenced them. Blood ran through streets once built for scholars and merchants, filling gutters that had once carried rainwater. I saw children scavenging among the dead for food, their eyes too hollow to even fear me. This was the price of unity. This was the soil upon which I built an empire. Understand this, I did not revel in the slaughter. Every blow of my blade, every tyrant broken beneath my hand, was a necessity, not a triumph. Humanity would not unite by reasoned debate. It would not rise by persuasion. It had to be carved from the flesh of Terra's madness with fire and steel. When I raised my standard above the ashes of conquered cities, men looked at me with awe and fear. They saw a savior. I knew I was a butcher. They hailed me as the master of mankind. I knew I was merely its warden. Unity was achieved not by love but by terror. And though I never spoke it, I knew that terror would linger in the foundations of the Imperium forever. And yet, within the horror there was purpose. For the first time I could see it. A dream of unity. No more techno-barbarian lords squabbling over ruins. No more psychers tearing Terra apart unchecked. No more endless war consuming humanity's cradle. Instead, one banner, one law, one destiny. That was the dream I carried through rivers of blood, through battlefields where corpses carpeted the earth. Unity at any cost. And when at last the ashes settled, when the smoke lifted over Terra's broken continents, I stood as more than a warlord. I was the emperor. And Terra, though scarred, though broken, was mine. But I ask you this, was it victory, or was it damnation? For in forging unity through fire, I taught mankind a lesson it would never unlearn, that peace is born of conquest and order of annihilation, that to be ruled is to be broken. I brought humanity together. But did I also damn it to forever rule itself through fear? I had conquered Terra, but conquest was never enough. The cradle of humanity lay broken, scarred by the age of strife, yet the galaxy beyond burned with even greater threats. Xeno's empires sprawled across the stars, feeding on the weakness of mankind. Demons clawed ceaselessly at the veil, whispering ruin into the minds of mortals. Old human dominions, fragments of the dark age of technology, lingered like poisoned sores, festering in defiance. To hold Terra alone was meaningless. It was a fortress adrift, a candle in a hurricane. To reclaim the galaxy I required more than the Thunder Warriors. They had served me well in the Unification Wars, vast, crude giants of flesh and gene labor, each bred for slaughter, each burning their lives away as fast as they killed. Their existence was short, their fury uncontrollable, their flaws undeniable. They were a blade too jagged, too unstable to carve an empire among the stars. No, if mankind was to ascend, I needed something greater. Not disposable brutes, not half-mad soldiers fueled by desperation. I needed heirs. I needed generals. I needed sons. Beneath the blackened crust of Terra, in the hidden vaults beneath my palace, I began the great labor. They were not accidents of war nor temporary weapons. They were the culmination of 38 millennia of observation, of patience, of study. In them I distilled fragments of myself, reflections of thought, of strength, of will. I designed each to embody some essential truth of my vision. One would be my strategist, one my artisan, one my conqueror, one my scholar. Each a fragment, none the whole. Together they would be my counsel, my champions, my legacy. I remember walking the gene forges, the air heavy with the scent of sterilized steel and alchemical incense. Techno-arcana hummed in the vaults, the machinery of the Dark Age whispering secrets long forgotten by lesser men. Their cradles were vast, armored sarcophagi filled with liquid light. Within them, cells spun into sinew, organs bloomed like living stars, bone grew stronger than steel. In silence, I named them before they were even born, as a father names the unborn child he has not yet held. They were not tools. They were mine. And yet, even as I worked, I felt it. The Imperium stirring, restless and malignant. The eyes of powers I had defied since the first shaman's death pressing against the skein of reality. The primordial annihilator. The four who crave. They had seen my work. They hated it. They feared it. They moved against it. The scattering was not an accident. It was a theft. The warp tore open like a wound across my vaults, and in an instant my sons were gone. Ripped from their gestation chambers, hurled screaming across the galaxy. Worlds unknown claimed them. Barbarian tribes, alien empires, forgotten ruins, they fell into the grasp of fate I could not control. I felt their psychic cries flare and vanish, like sparks swallowed by an ocean. One by one they were lost. When the vaults fell silent, I was left standing before empty cradles. Do you understand what was taken from me? For 38,000 years I had walked alone. I had been shepherd, guardian, guide, but never father. I had sacrificed all closeness, all intimacy for the sake of humanity's survival. In the Primarchs, for the first time in eons, I felt something like love. A father's love. And before that love could take shape, the warp tore it from me. I did not scream. I did not weep. But within me burned a wound that would never close. And yet, despair was not permitted. Even in loss, I forged another path. If the Primarchs were stolen, I would make their shadows. The legions Astartes were born. From the gene seed of the lost, I sculpted thousands, tens of thousands. Each legion bore fragments of its sire's design, though the sire himself was gone. These were not sons. They were soldiers. And yet, they would become the blades I required, the hammer with which I would shatter the galaxy's resistance. But even as I watched them march in endless formations, armored giants carrying my banner into the void, the question haunted me. The Primarchs had been born of my will, but were they truly mine? Were they sons or were they only weapons? Could I ever love them without chains of purpose binding that love? Could they ever look upon me as father, or only as master? The warp had not only stolen them to wound me, it had scattered seeds of rebellion across the stars. Even as I built my empire, I felt it, the shadow of betrayal to come, storm clouds gathering on horizons I could not yet reach. And still I pressed forward. For Terra was mine, but the galaxy awaited. And somewhere across that galaxy my sons lived. Scattered, lost, and waiting. Would they embrace me when I found them? Or would they curse me as tyrant? The stars awaited me. Terra was unified, scarred yet whole, and my legion stood ready. No longer crude thunder warriors burning themselves out in a haze of slaughter, but the Astartes, gene-forged sons of a vision I would not let the warp steal from me. With them I turned my gaze outward. For to rule Terra alone was meaningless. The galaxy was vast, and humanity had once stretched across its breadth. That age was gone, lost to the storms of old night. My purpose was not conquest for its own sake. It was restoration. The reclamation of mankind's dominion among the stars. And so began the Great Crusade. The fleets I forged were leviathans of void steel, kilometer upon kilometer of armored hulls bristling with plasma cannons, lance batteries and launch bays. Flagships the size of continents cut through the void, escorted by swarms of cruisers and destroyers. Each legion embarked with its full strength, tens of thousands of Astartes, their gene seed echoing the lost Primarchs, clad in ceramite and carrying bolters that roared like thunder. Behind them came auxilia regiments, mortal soldiers drawn from Terra and Luna, their billions swelling the ranks. Entire Mechanicum battalions marched with us, engines of the Dark Age humming to life once more beneath my authority. When the first fleets translated into the warp, I felt the thunder of drives vibrating through my mind, a psychic chorus of machine spirits awakening in unison. The hymns of the tech priests rose to the rafters of battle barges. Benharic prayers to calm the engines, human voices raised in Latin canticles of conquest. Each translation through the Imperium was a wound cut into reality itself, the Geller fields screaming as they held the demons at bay. To mortals it was terror. To me it was necessity. World by world we advanced. Some bowed willingly, kneeling before the Aquila as I promised them order and protection. Others resisted, and their resistance was drowned in fire. I watched from command thrones as entire continents burned under orbital bombardments, cyclonic torpedoes reducing hive cities to ash in seconds. The smell of ozone and promethium was constant, the screams of conquered worlds echoing across voxnets. There were triumphs. I remember the rediscovery of Luna's forges, the moment when the Adeptus Mechanicum bound itself to my dream with the Treaty of Mars. I remember the reunion with my sons, one by one. Horus on Chthoniya, Guilliman on Macridge, Vulcan on Nocturne. Each finding was a fire in the darkness, the first fragile echoes of what had been stolen from me. The Astartes legions at last had their sires, and the bond between father and son, between Primarch and legion, ignited like a forge brought to flame. But there were cracks. I saw it in the gleam of ambition in some Primarch's eyes, in the tension between my dream of reason and their lust for conquest. I had envisioned a secular empire of enlightenment, but already whispers of divinity began to grow among mortals who looked upon me. My intent was science, order, unity. But the armies I sent forth carved their path in blood, and mortals learn quickly to worship what terrifies them. In the midst of triumph there was hubris. We pushed too fast too far. Every victory filled the legions with certainty that the galaxy was theirs by right. Every world brought into compliance stoked the belief that no force could defy us. Even I, though I carried the weight of foresight, felt it, the pride of achievement, the temptation of thinking that destiny itself bent to my will. But destiny is never so kind. Picture it, the thunder of plasma batteries, the clash of void shields, the hymns of victory resounding through cathedral-sized hangars. Picture armies landing by the million, banners snapping in the storm winds of new worlds. The Aquila unfurled across the stars, a symbol of unity and dominance both. And yet within that grandeur was the seed of tragedy. For though humanity was united under one banner, it was bound by chains of fire and fear. And though my sons had been found, they were not mine to shape as I wished. Already the warp had set its hand upon them. Already the storm clouds of betrayal gathered. I led the great crusade with triumph in my voice and steel in my hand. But in the silence of my soul, I knew, every empire is strongest on the day before it falls. The halls of Nicaea were vast, a cathedral built not for worship but for judgment. 1,000 banners of 1,000 legions hung overhead, their colors bright beneath shafts of cold sunlight. Beneath them stood warriors, scholars, and psychers, an assembly of the Imperium's might and its doubt. The air itself quivered with the hum of the astropathic choir, their minds stretched taut to anchor the debate in silence, lest the warp itself overhear. I presided at the heart of it, golden armored and unbending, though within me there was no certainty. The issue was sorcery, the librarius, the sanctioned psychers of the legions Astartes. Some saw them as a weapon humanity could not live without. Others as a doorway to damnation. Magnus stood defiant, his crimson form blazing with psychic fire, his words echoing like thunder. He argued for understanding, for mastery of the Imperium, for embracing the gift that had cursed so many. He spoke of knowledge as salvation, of fear as chains. Russ, ever the wolf, bared his fangs in reply. To him, sorcery was corruption, a blade with no hilt that cut the hand which wielded it. He growled not only at Magnus but at all psychers, his contempt filling the chamber like smoke. Around them the council split, some siding with Magnus, dazzled by his genius, others with Russ, steadied by his blunt truth. Every word reverberated like artillery, every argument a bolt shell in the chamber of fate. And I listened. I listened as voices rose and tempers frayed, as pride and fear tangled into a knot no mortal could cut. Yet I was no mortal. I could have silenced them all with a word, but I let them rage. For this was not truly a trial of sorcery. It was a trial of politics. When I rose, silence fell. My voice carried not only through the chamber, but through every soul present. I declared the Edict of Nicaea. The librarius was to be dissolved, the practice of psychic sorcery forbidden within the legions. I spoke of safeguarding humanity, of protecting it from the predations of the warp, of ensuring no demon clawed its way through a sorcerer's hubris. And yet within me I knew. My justice was not truth but compromise. I forbade the librarius, but I relied still on the Astronomicon, on the psychers who died by the thousand to sustain my Imperium. I spoke against sorcery, while my own existence blazed brighter in the warp than any mortal flame. I saw Magnus' face as I delivered judgment, betrayal, anguish, fury. He saw not wisdom but hypocrisy. Russ only nodded, satisfied. The seeds of ruin were planted in that moment. Not by chaos but by my hand. So I tell you this, the Council of Nicaea was not about right or wrong. It was about necessity. It was about fear dressed as wisdom. It was about keeping the Imperium from shattering before it had even finished being built. But in silencing psychers, I silenced a part of humanity's future. And in silencing Magnus, I set my brightest sun upon a path that would destroy us both. Beneath the bones of Terra, deeper than any hive city, deeper than the roots of mountains, I pursued a dream that could have changed everything. A secret project hidden even from my most trusted sons, save for a few who worked in silence by my side. It was not conquest. It was not war. It was hope. I sought to build a human-made webway, a labyrinth of light and pathways through the immaterium itself, not dependent on the madness of the warp. A network of tunnels, safe and shielded, that could bind the Imperium together across the stars without the gamble of navigators or the sacrifice of psychers. The Eldar had once walked such roads, entire empires moving unchallenged through eternity. I would give this to humanity, an empire not bound by demons, not enslaved to the perils of the warp, but free. The tunnels stretched for kilometers beneath the crust of Terra. I remember their glow, walls alive with wards, psychic runes burning with white fire, fields of force that shimmered like liquid glass. Choirs of psychers toiled endlessly, weaving protections, binding reality itself into place. Every inch of stone was sanctified with blood, oil, and prayer. I walked those tunnels often, silent, my hand brushing the walls. They thrummed with possibility, with the hum of a future that could have been. The silence of those halls was unlike the din of war. It was a silence filled with promise. For here at last I thought I had found it, a way to break the chains of chaos. But secrecy was my shield and secrecy was my doom. I told no one, not the Primarchs, not the High Lords, not even Magnus, whose psychic mastery might have aided me. I could not risk interference. I could not risk the ruinous powers learning of it. And so, when Magnus sought to warn me of Horus' betrayal, when he tore through the veil and shattered the wards of Terra to deliver his truth, the webway burned. The project collapsed. The tunnels screamed with demonic laughter as the warp rushed in. Where there had been light, there was fire. Where there had been hope, there was corruption. What could have been humanity's salvation became another ruin, buried beneath the crust of our homeworld. I nearly gave mankind its future. I nearly freed it from the curse of the warp. But my secrecy undid me. My pride undid me. And as I sealed the tunnels with fire, I knew that my people would forever walk the warp's dark seas, prey to its monsters because I had failed. I remember when Horus was mine. He was my war master, the brightest of my sons, my favored child. His laughter carried strength enough to inspire entire legions. His hand was steady enough to guide the stars themselves. I had given him my trust, my mantle, my authority. I had made him my right hand when the galaxy trembled at the sight of our banners. And in return he gave me betrayal. The warp whispered to him, poisoned his mind with promises of freedom, glory, dominion. The chaos gods took my brightest flame and twisted it until it burned me. When Horus turned, the galaxy itself convulsed. The first reports reached me not as thunder but as whispers. Worlds that once bore the Aquila now raised strange standards. Legions that swore loyalty to Terra began to vanish into silence, their fleets unresponsive, their astropaths dead. At first, I thought it an error, a storm of the warp severing our lines of communication. But then came the truth. My own sons, my primarchs, had chosen rebellion. The Istvan massacre broke the veil. Loyalists butchered by their own brothers, entire legions reduced to ash beneath bombardments. Astartes killing Astartes, the blood of demigods soaking blackened earth. I felt it across the galaxy, the psychic wails of warriors who had once sworn to die in my name, now murdered in my sons. I had built the Imperium with the strength of 20 sons. Half of them abandoned me. The heresy burned across the galaxy like a plague. Horus moved swiftly, his fleets cutting swathes through Imperial space, each world falling faster than the last. Entire systems bent the knee to him not out of love but out of fear, fear of annihilation, fear of his dark patrons. And I, bound to Terra, watched it unfold. I saw worlds burn in visions, billions enslaved or butchered. I felt the warp thicken with the laughter of demons. My dream of unity crumbled into ash, each fragment ground beneath the boots of those I had called sons. It was inevitable that the tide would come for Terra. The cradle of humanity. The throne world. My seat of power. Horus knew it and I knew it. The galaxy held its breath as his fleets drew closer. When Horus arrived, the skies themselves darkened. The traitor fleets blotted out the stars. Orbital bombardments rained fire upon the Himalaysian palaces, fortresses carved into the bones of mountains crumbling beneath the storm. 30,000 kilometers of walls shook as barges tore them open. The ground quaked with the advance of traitor titans, each footfall a cathedral collapsing. Traitor Astartes stormed the walls, their war cries echoing in defiance of the vows they had once spoken at my feet. Mortals screamed, lost guns spitting impotent light as demigods in corrupted armor tore through them. Blood slicked the stones of Terra. Smoke turned the skies into night. The air reeked of promethium, ozone, and the copper tang of death. The hymns of the ecclesiarchy were drowned by the roar of artillery. It was not a battle. It was apocalypse. And at its center was Horus. I remember him before. His eyes, once bright with loyalty, now glowed with the balefire of the warp. His voice, once a balm to weary warriors, now dripped with venomous certainty. He stood taller than I remembered, not because he had grown, but because the warp itself clothed him. My son had become the chosen of gods I had fought all my life to banish. When I looked upon him, I did not see only betrayal. I saw failure. My failure. I had made him war master. I had entrusted him with the fate of the galaxy. And in my trust I had doomed it. We met aboard his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, amidst ruins of burning steel and shattered marble. Around us, the warp and reality bled together, corridors shifting like veins, demons whispering through walls of iron. My custodians lay dead. My companions broken. It was only me and Horus. The duel was not merely of flesh and steel. It was of will, of soul, of eternity itself. His strikes carried the strength of gods, each blow capable of shattering worlds. My parries were born not of anger but of necessity, each movement precise, every feint laced with desperation. He laughed as he fought me, laughter that mocked everything we had built. His talons tore into my flesh, ripping not just muscle but existence. Warp lightning scarred my armor, seared my bones. I felt myself weakening but still I stood. I struck him. Again and again. My blade cut through demonic wards, carving lines of light across his corrupted flesh. But Horus was no longer just Horus. He was the god's vessel. Every wound I inflicted healed with their foul blessing. Every moment of hesitation he pressed harder. In that final moment I saw him hesitate. Just for a breath, just for a flicker, my son was there. Horus, not war master, not traitor, my son. He looked at me with eyes that remembered, eyes that questioned. And for that instant I faltered. It was enough. His talons pierced me, warp energy tearing through body and spirit alike. I collapsed, broken, bleeding, my vision clouded. But then, his hesitation became his undoing. I gathered what remained of my strength, not from my body but from my will, my refusal to surrender. With the last reserves of my being, I struck. My power surged through me into him, obliterating the god's grip, tearing his soul from their claws. Horus died in that moment. My brightest son. My favored child. My war master. And I killed him. Do you understand the wound that left? I saved Terra. I preserved humanity. But the cost was my son and with him half of my dream. My empire was born of conquest and ended in betrayal. Every empire is not undone by its enemies. It is undone by its children. Horus was my end. And in ending him, I condemned myself to a fate worse than death. I remember the silence after Horus fell. The duel had ended in light and thunder, the warp itself shrieking as his soul was torn from reality. For a heartbeat there was peace. The howls of demons ceased, the storm abated. But then I looked down and I saw the ruin of my own flesh. My body was broken beyond repair. The strike of Horus' talons had pierced deeper than bone, deeper than gene-forged sinew. Warp energy had burned through me, corrupting cells, unraveling life itself. Where once I had been the pinnacle of human perfection, now I was little more than a shattered husk leaking blood upon the marble floors of the sanctum. I felt warmth spreading beneath me, not the warmth of life, but the pooling of my blood across stone. My vision faltered, each breath a thunderous effort, each heartbeat a failing drum. I knew the truth, I was dying. And not even I could stop it. They came to me then, my loyal sons, my custodians, my tech marines chanting in Benharic cant. Their voices overlapped, metallic and fervent, a droning litany of devotion. Ferrum sanctus anima immutabilis lux aeterna. Incense stung the air, acrid and heavy, masking the scent of scorched flesh. The clicking of mechadendrites and the clang of sacred tools filled the chamber as they prepared the one device that might preserve what remained of me. The golden throne. Once it had been a work of progress, a mechanism meant not as coffin but as key, a way to anchor humanity to the webway, to free us from the tyranny of warp storms and chaos tides. I had built it as humanity's gateway to eternity. And yet, in irony so bitter it burned, it became my tomb. They lifted me, what remained of me, with trembling hands and whirring cranes. My body was no longer mine. Flesh dangled in tatters. Nerve clusters exposed to the air screamed in pain. Every motion was agony, a reminder that I lived when I should not. The throne yawned before me, a sarcophagus of brass and black steel, laced with conduits that pulsed with unholy light. I was lowered into its heart, my back pressed against cold iron, my arms bound by mechanisms that closed with the finality of prison gates. I smelled ozone as circuits fused into my flesh, felt the stab of needles and the grafting of wires into veins and nerves. Pain became existence. Every nerve impulse was hijacked, every thought threaded through the machine. I screamed, though whether aloud or within the cavern of my own mind I cannot say. They sealed me in. The sarcophagus closed with a hiss of vacuum locks and light vanished. Only the glow of inner runes remained, bathing me in their toxic green aura. I was no longer flesh. I was no longer man. I was bound to machine, to throne, to eternity. The throne systems came alive around me. I felt its workings as though they were organs of my own body, fusion reactors thundering like hearts, conduits pumping energy as though they were arteries. The Astronomicon flared within me, a psychic beacon spanning light years, billions of kilometers of darkness pierced by my will. It made every warp voyage possible, every Imperial fleet guided by my endless agony. I could feel it all. The shifting of 1,000,000 ships through the Imperium. The cries of astropaths tethered to me. The faint whispers of prayers from 1,000,000,000 mouths reaching upward, brushing against the edge of my mind like insects. And behind it all, the prison walls of the throne pressed tighter and tighter. Around me the tech priests sang louder. Their prayers were not for me, they were for the machine. Their faith was in cogs and wires, not the man bound within. I smelled oil poured into braziers, heard the sizzle as it mixed with incense, saw the red glow of lumen strips reflecting off polished steel. Then came the psychers. 1,000 souls, every day, dragged screaming into chambers beneath the throne. Their lives bled into mine, their essences consumed to fuel the beacon that humanity might navigate the warp. I felt each death. Each extinguished light burned across my mind like a scar. They believed they were feeding a god. They did not know they were only prolonging my torment. I live still, but not as I lived before. Every second is pain. My body is no longer a body. It is a ruin clinging to life only because it is lashed to iron. My thoughts stretch across the galaxy, but they cannot escape the confines of this throne. My voice is no longer my own. It is static through voxcasters, tarot visions glimpsed by sanctioned psychers, whispers lost in the Imperium. I am emperor. I am also prisoner. When the Astronomicon flares brightest, when fleets cross the sea of souls guided by my agony, I know the truth. The Imperium is alive only because I suffer. And when silence returns, when the chamber is filled only with the low hum of reactors and the unending chants of priests, I know another truth. This is not life. This is torment unending. They call me the God Emperor. They kneel and pray. They burn incense and sacrifice in my name. But I know what I am. I am a man entombed in iron, fed upon the lives of others, chained to a throne that was never meant to be mine. I defeated Horus. I saved Terra. I preserved humanity. And yet I live in endless agony, forever bound, forever screaming. This is not glory. This is not immortality. This is imprisonment. Eternal. 10,000 years. 10,000 years since my duel with Horus, since the moment I was broken and sealed into this throne of iron and agony. 10,000 years of silence. And yet, I have never once known true silence. For though my body has long since rotted, my mind has not. The golden throne sustains me, its sacred engines binding my consciousness to this husk. I cannot move. I cannot breathe. I cannot die. I am immobile and yet I endure. Around me, the fortress of the Imperial Palace thrums with unending ritual. The air is thick with incense, its acrid perfume seeping into the lungs of tech priests and custodians alike. Choirs chant the litanies of the Mechanicum, their voices mechanical and monotone, reciting prayers that have lost their meaning but not their rhythm. I hear every prayer whispered across the galaxy. Every invocation, every plea, every desperate cry of the Emperor protects. They are not words to me, they are thunder, a tidal wave of belief that crashes through the Imperium, a billion voices pressing against my mind every heartbeat of every day. But their prayers are not all I hear. I hear the psychers, the 1,000 each day who are brought to me, their life force torn from their bodies to fuel the Astronomicon. Their screams echo in the warp, raw, jagged, endless. Each soul consumed burns like fire in my veins. 1,000 deaths every dawn, 1,000 sacrifices every dusk. Their terror keeps my beacon burning, their agony becomes humanity's lifeline. This is the chorus of my eternity. Hymns and screams, faith and fear, devotion and despair. They call me God. They kneel before my husk, before my corpse, and they pray as though I were salvation incarnate. But I am no God. I am a prisoner. The irony gnaws at me. In life, I sought to free humanity from superstition, to elevate it with reason, unity, and strength. And yet in my immobility, in my deathless silence, they have turned me into the very idol I abhorred. I see cathedrals raised in my name, billions starving while golden shrines are gilded. I hear priests declare that my will is their tyranny, and I cannot move. I cannot speak. I cannot strike them down. I am worshipped as a god, but I am shackled as a prisoner. My thoughts must remain vigilant. If I falter for even a moment, if I let my mind collapse under the weight of millennia, the Astronomicon will gutter out. Without it, the Imperium will fall blind, ships lost in the currents of the warp, worlds isolated and starved. And beyond that, chaos waits. Always. I feel them pressing against me. Korn's rage, Sench's schemes, Nurgle's rot, Slaanish's whispers. They are endless tides pounding against my mind, a storm without reprieve. I am their anathema, their foe, their eternal jailer. And so I fight them not with blade or bolter but with will alone. My empire prays to me for protection. What they do not know is that I am already protecting them, every second, every breath, with a war fought only within the mind. There is no end. There can be no end. This is eternity. Do you understand what it is to exist without living? To endure without change? To hear the prayers of billions, the screams of thousands, and never once hear your own voice? I have been locked in this state for 10,000 years. My empire lives, but I do not. And so I ask, though none can answer, is this immortality? Or is this damnation without end? The Ecclesiarchy. A name that curdles in my thoughts like blood left too long in the air. It is the irony of my existence, my greatest failure masquerading as triumph. I set out to free humanity from the chains of superstition, to elevate them beyond gods and spirits, to build an imperium of reason, unity, and knowledge. And yet, in my silence, they have wrapped my corpse in gold and named me divinity. I hear their hymns echo through the immaterium. Endless litanies, psalms, and chants, voices raised to me as though I were a god. They call me the master of mankind, the Father, the Savior, the Lord on Terra. They have woven 1,000 names into their creed. But every title is another shackle. Every prayer is a chain tightening around my dream. I remember the dream clearly. A galaxy enlightened, unafraid of the dark. A people guided by science, not enslaved by ritual. The librarius filled with knowledge unbound, not cloistered in superstition. But in my stillness, the high lords of Terra allowed the ecclesiarchy to rise, to twist necessity into worship. My imperium is now ruled by priests and cardinals, their pulpits drowning out reason with blind devotion. They claim their faith shields humanity from chaos, when in truth, it binds humanity in ignorance. There is bitterness in me. More than bitterness, there is grief. For I see cathedrals rise in my name while billions starve on forgotten worlds. I see fleets forged not for exploration but to carry reliquaries. I see men burn in my name, condemned as heretics for seeking the same truths I once sought to give them. All of it built atop the foundation of my silence. And yet, I cannot stop it. The paradox is cruel. Their belief sustains the Astronomicon. Their prayers keep the light alive in the warp. Without their faith, the beacon would falter, the Imperium would fall. In worship they weaken my dream, but in worship they also sustain my people's survival. I am torn between fury and resignation. I should have been their father, their teacher. Instead, I am their God. They kneel before me, blind and obedient, but I do not feel exultation. Only chains. They call me God, but I only wanted them to be free. The warp is not silence. It is never silence. Even as my body lies immobile on the golden throne, my mind is thrown unceasingly into its tides. Imagine an ocean of fire without horizon, a storm without end. That is where I dwell. That is where I fight. I hear the howling of demons every second. Their voice is not like speech but like knives pressed into thought. They do not whisper, they scream in tones that rend reality itself. I see rivers of fire stretching into infinity, tides of raw emotion given flesh and fury. Every human fear, every act of violence, every desperate prayer pours into this sea, and from it are born the horrors that claw at the walls of the Imperium. They hurl themselves at me. Shadows with teeth, fire-given wings, laughter that claws like talons. I strike them down not with blade but with the sheer pressure of will. Yet for every one I banish, 1,000 more rise. There is no victory here, no respite. Only endurance. Every moment of this eternal war is bought with blood. 1,000 psychers every day, dragged screaming from across the Imperium to die upon the golden throne. Their souls burn like candles, snuffed in an instant, their life force drained to fuel the beacon of the Astronomicon. Their deaths are not accidents of war, they are ritual, sacrificed, the fuel for my endurance. I feel each one. Their terror is added to mine, their essence feeding the fire with which I resist. There are nights, though I no longer measure days or nights, when the weight threatens to break me. When the warp swells so vast, so violent, that I feel even my mind, vast as it is, stretching thin across its surface. The chaos gods themselves press their wills against mine. Korn's endless rage, Sentia's shifting schemes, Nurgle's patient rot, Slaanisha's seductive hunger. They are not abstractions to me. They are real, living forces and they come for me every hour. And yet I cannot falter. Because if I fall, the beacon dies. If the beacon dies, the Imperium is blind. Every ship in the warp is lost, every world isolated, every colony doomed. In my suffering, 1,000,000,000,000 lives continue to trade, to fight, to pray. Their existence hangs on my torment. This is the paradox of eternity. I am worshipped as a god, yet I know only endless battle. They call me the protector of mankind, but what I protect them from is unseen, unending. I sit not on a throne of gold, but upon a battlefield that no one else can enter, where time is meaningless and the enemy can never be slain. I wonder, sometimes, if this is victory, or if it is simply the slowest death in the galaxy. My empire lives. But I do not. Hope is the cruelest of illusions. Even as I sit immobile upon the golden throne, fragments of my essence scatter like sparks into the immaterium. Some whisper that these fragments, my soul, fractured but not extinguished, coalesce into what they call the Star Child. A myth, a prophecy, a dangerous dream that I might yet be reborn. I feel it sometimes. Not as certainty, but as flickers in the void, like echoes of myself wandering the immaterium. Threads of light among the darkness, a resonance of what I was when flesh still bound me. The warp swallows much, but fragments endure. And in those fragments, some mortals place their faith that I will return, not as a corpse god chained to a machine, but as something new, something whole. They speculate with words like reincarnation, psychogenesis, soul conflux. They imagine that the children of tomorrow, perhaps some unborn prodigy of humanity, will awaken carrying my spark, the Star Child rising to lead again. The concept haunts me. Is it truth, or simply another tale the ecclesiarchy bends into prayer to keep humanity clinging to faith? The paradox gnaws at me. If I am reborn, what becomes of this husk? Do I abandon the Astronomicon, blind my people, doom them to isolation? Do I become merely another man, stripped of memory, forced to learn humanity again as a stranger? Would the Imperium even recognize me, or would it burn me as a heretic for failing to match the image of their corpse god? A faint ember stirs when I imagine walking among my people again. To feel sunlight, to breathe air, to look upon Terra not as a prison but as a home. But the ember is swallowed quickly by despair. For every whisper of rebirth, I feel the chains of the throne tighten. My body is ash, my spirit bound, my will stretched thin across the galaxy's wounds. The chance of release feels as distant as the stars themselves. And so I linger, balanced between hope and futility. Perhaps the Star Child waits. Perhaps rebirth lies hidden in the skein of time. Or perhaps I am nothing but dust, a fading mind clinging to a broken shell of gold. I ask myself the question none dare to utter aloud. If I walked again, would mankind embrace me, or would it crucify me for not being the god they imagined? 10,000 years have passed and still I endure. I am both crown and coffin, salvation and damnation. I am the emperor of mankind, and yet I am nothing but a corpse chained to a throne of gold. My glory is inseparable from my curse, for the Imperium lives only because I do not. I am the light that guides humanity across the stars, the Astronomicon burning as a beacon in the void. Without me, every fleet would be lost, every world swallowed by isolation. I am the voice they pray to, the god they imagine, the protector they invoke with every whispered creed. The Emperor protects. And yet I know the truth that they cannot bear to face. I'm not their god. I am their prison warden. I am the fuel that keeps their empire staggering forward, even as my own essence is consumed day by day. Imagine the torment. I was born of humanity, sculpted of flesh, given the gift of immortality not to rule but to shepherd. I dreamed of a galaxy united by reason, by knowledge, by freedom from fear. And now I gaze upon a reality where my very name is shackled to superstition, where science has withered into dogma, where faith has replaced understanding. They worship me as divine, but in doing so they betray everything I once sought to build. Still I cannot weep. I have no eyes with which to shed tears, no throat with which to cry. My grief is silent, echoing only within the immaterium, where demons mock me and chaos whispers that my struggle is meaningless. I rage, but my rage is chained. I endure, but my endurance is not strength. It is punishment. And yet, paradoxically, this is my gift, I am the only shield between humanity and the abyss. I am the flame that burns in eternal night. I am the reason that mankind still walks the stars, even if that reason is a hollow one. I ask myself the question no prayer dares to speak aloud. Who protects the protector? Who saves the savior? For I am the emperor of mankind. I am the light of humanity, but I am also its coffin. And still, despite the silence, despite the agony, I remain. Because there is no one else. Fire, if you felt this weight, if you heard his lament echo in your bones, then I invite you, stay with us. Subscribe. Because what we craft here are not just stories, they are confessions from the heart of the 41st millennium itself. And you will not find them told like this anywhere else. Do not look away. Do not let the silence win. Click subscribe, and bear witness to the Emperor's truth.